What if the strongest thing you've ever done wasn't something anyone else would consider impressive? It wasn't a race. It wasn't a personal record. It wasn't lifting a certain amount of weight or reaching some fitness milestone. Maybe it was getting out of bed during a season when you didn't really want to face the day. Maybe it was walking around the block after an illness. Maybe it was starting over after an injury. Maybe it was going to the gym even though you felt completely out of place. Or maybe it was simply deciding, I'm going to try again. We tend to think strength is something we prove, but I think movement teaches us something very different. Strength isn't always about how fast you can go, how far you can go, or how much you can endure. Sometimes strength is simply discovering that there's more inside you than you realized. And that's what I want to talk about today, because movement has this incredible way of introducing us to parts of ourselves we might never meet otherwise. Hey everybody, welcome to the Soul Talk podcast, where we have conversations about movement, mindfulness, mental health, and what it means to live fully in the body you're in. I'm Mary Beth, and I'm really glad you're here. We're continuing our Movement is Medicine series, and today's conversation is called Stronger Than You Think, What Movement Teaches Us About Ourselves. And before we get into it, if these conversations resonate with you, take a second to please subscribe to my channel, or please follow my podcast on any of the podcasting sites. It really does help this podcast continue to grow. And more importantly, it helps these conversations reach people who may need them. Okay, let's talk about strength, because I think we've misunderstood it. What do you think strength looks like? So when you hear the word strong, what comes to mind? Take a second to actually think about that. What does that mean? It's maybe someone running a marathon, someone lifting weights, someone with visible muscles, someone climbing a mountain, or someone pushing through something incredibly difficult. And yes, those things absolutely require strength. But somewhere along the way, we started associating strength almost exclusively with performance. How much can you do? How far can you go? How fast can you go? How much can you tolerate? And movement has actually taught me almost the opposite. Because the longer you move through life, literally and figuratively, the more you realize that some of the strongest moments don't look impressive at all. Sometimes strength looks like slowing down. Sometimes it looks like walking instead of running. Sometimes it looks like resting. Sometimes it's modifying the workout. Sometimes it's realizing that what worked for your body 5 years ago doesn't work anymore. And instead of getting angry at your body, you learn to work with it. That is strength too. And I think that's one of the greatest lessons movement gives us. It constantly asks us to meet ourselves where we actually are, not where we wish we were, not where we used to be, not where somebody else is. Here, today, in this body, in this moment. Because movement shows you who you are when things get hard. I mean, think about what happens when you're walking or running and suddenly it gets difficult. Maybe there's a hill ahead. Your legs are tired. Your breathing changes. And immediately the mind starts talking. I can't do this. I'm tired. Why did I think this was a good idea? Maybe I should stop. And I laugh about this because anyone who has spent enough time running has probably had an entire crisis somewhere around, say, mile 9. You're questioning your training, your shoes, your breakfast, your life choices, everything. And yet, you keep moving. Maybe you slow down. Maybe you walk. Maybe you stop for water. Maybe you take a minute and then you start again. There's something incredibly important happening there. You're learning that discomfort doesn't always mean you have to quit. But you're also learning that continuing doesn't always mean pushing harder. Sometimes continuing means adjusting. That's a very different kind of strength because life works the same way. We hit hills. Things don't go according to plan. Relationships change. Bodies change. Careers change. People disappoint us. We disappoint ourselves. Plans fall apart. And the question becomes, what do I do now? Movement gives us practice answering that question. Maybe I slow down. Maybe I change direction. Maybe I rest. Maybe I ask for help. Maybe I try again tomorrow. But I don't have to decide that because this moment is difficult. The whole thing is over. That's resilience. So you learn your first thought isn't always true. This is one of my favorite things movement teaches us. Your brain can be incredibly convincing. You start walking up a hill and your brain says, nope, you've barely started. We're not doing this. Your body isn't actually finished. Your brain isn't just uncomfortable. And that's fascinating because how often does that happen outside of movement? I can't do this. I'm too old. I'm too late. I'm not good at this. That's not who I am. People like me don't do things like that. We treat those thoughts like facts. But movement gives us the opportunity to test them. You think, I can't go another mile. Then you go another half mile. Then another quarter. And eventually you realize, oh, that thought wasn't a fact. It was a feeling. It was discomfort. It was fear. It was uncertainty. But it wasn't necessarily the truth. And that realization starts following you home. Because maybe the next time you hear, I can't do this, you become curious instead of immediately believing it. Maybe you ask, is that true? Or am I just uncomfortable because I'm doing something I've never done before? Now that's a powerful distinction. Because movement teaches you to stop comparing. Or at least it gives you plenty of opportunities to practice. Because comparison shows up everywhere. Someone's always faster. Someone's stronger. Someone has been doing this longer. Someone seems to recover faster. Someone looks more athletic. And now with social media, we don't even have to leave the house to compare ourselves. We can sit on the couch and feel inadequate. That's convenient. But here's what movement actually or eventually teaches you. You cannot live inside someone else's body. Their pace isn't your pace. Their history isn't your history. Their genetics aren't your genetics. Their responsibilities aren't yours. Their injuries aren't yours. Their life isn't yours. And eventually movement asks you to stop looking sideways and start paying attention to what's happening underneath your own feet. There's something incredibly freeing about that. Because suddenly the question changes. Instead of, am I as good as they are? It becomes, what does my body need today? That's a much more useful question. And frankly, it's a much kinder way to live. You see, movement teaches us about failure. I think movement also changes our relationship with failure. Because sometimes the run is terrible. The workout doesn't happen. You miss the goal. You have to stop. You get injured. You train for something and don't get the result you wanted. And it can be incredibly disappointing. But eventually you realize something. One bad run doesn't mean you're a bad runner. One missed workout doesn't mean you're lazy. One setback doesn't erase everything you've done. And one difficult season doesn't mean you're back at the beginning. That's a lesson we desperately need outside of fitness. We are so quick to turn an experience into an identity. Something didn't work, so I'm a failure. I struggled, so I'm not good enough. I stopped, so I quit. But movement keeps giving you another day, another walk, another workout, another opportunity. And eventually you learn, I can have a bad experience without making it mean something terrible about who I am. That's emotional strength. Movement also teaches you to trust yourself. And I think this may be one of the most important lessons of all. Every time you tell yourself you're going to walk for 10 minutes and you do it, something happens. Every time you say, I'm going to take care of myself today, and then you actually follow through, you build something. Trust. Not because you did something extraordinary, but because you kept a small promise to yourself. We tend to think confidence comes before action. Once I feel confident, I'll do it. But most of the time, confidence comes afterward. You do something. And your brain goes, oh, yeah, we can do that. Then you do it again and again. And eventually you start seeing yourself differently. Not because somebody gave you permission. Not because somebody told you you're capable. Because you have evidence. You've watched yourself show up. You've watched yourself adapt. You've watched yourself fall short in return. You've watched yourself have difficult days without abandoning yourself. And eventually something inside you begins to say, I trust. I trust myself. I know I'm going to take care of me. And that's huge. That's enormous. See, strength changes as we change. And I think this becomes especially important as we get older because our bodies change. And sometimes we fight that. We compare ourselves to who we were at 30 or 40 or 50. We think strength means maintaining exactly what we used to be able to do. But what if strength evolves? Maybe strength at one point in your life was running faster. And now it's having the wisdom to recover. I have a couple of friends who are in their late 70s and early 80s who are still out there. They may not be running or running as fast as what they used to, but they're out there. And that's strength. Maybe strength used to be pushing through, and now it's knowing when not to. Maybe strength used to be proving something, And now it's enjoying movement because you can. There's something beautiful about allowing movement to grow with us instead of using it to fight against ourselves. Your body isn't asking you to become who you used to be. It's asking you to live in relationship with who you are now. And maybe that means running. Maybe it means walking. Maybe it means swimming. Maybe it means yoga. Maybe it means strength training. Maybe it means dancing around your kitchen while you're making a meal. It counts because the goal isn't to win at movement. The goal is to stay connected to yourself through it. Because the ordinary moments are when we discover our strength. And here's something else I've been thinking about. We tend to recognize our strength only after something dramatic. You realize something difficult and say, I didn't know I was that strong. But what about the ordinary days? What about getting up when you're tired, taking a walk, doing stretches, going outside, choosing to move your body when nobody is watching and nobody is applauding? Those moments matter too, because strength isn't created only in extraordinary circumstances. It's built quietly, one decision at a time, one step at a time, one ordinary day when you really didn't feel like moving, but you went outside anyway. And maybe you only walked for 10 minutes, but you came back different. Not because 10 minutes changed your fitness, because you reminded yourself, I can move myself forward. And that is powerful. Movement doesn't just change the body. This is why I keep coming back to the idea that movement is medicine. Because movement isn't just changing your muscles. It's changing your relationship with yourself. It's teaching you patience. It's teaching you adaptability. It's teaching you how to tolerate discomfort without immediately running from it. It's teaching you when to push and when to soften. It's teaching you that rest isn't failure. It's teaching you that progress isn't always visible. It's teaching you to listen. And maybe most importantly, it's teaching you that you are capable of becoming someone you haven't met yet. Not because you're trying to become a different person, but because there are parts of you that sometimes only show up when life asks something of you. The patient version of you, the courageous version, the stubborn version, the compassionate version, the version that says, okay, that didn't work. What can I try instead? See, movement introduces us to those parts of ourselves. And something you might want to try this week. So here's what I'd love for you to do this week. The next time you move your body, don't only pay attention to what your body is doing. Pay attention to what you're learning about yourself. Maybe you're walking and you realize, I'm more patient than I used to be. Maybe you're running and you notice, I don't panic when things get uncomfortable anymore. Maybe you're strength training and think, 6 months ago, I couldn't do this. Maybe you're coming back from an injury and realize, I thought starting over meant I had failed, but I'm actually learning how to begin differently. Or maybe you simply notice I showed up today. Don't rush past that. Let yourself recognize it. Because sometimes we're so focused on where we're going that we completely miss who we're becoming along the way. And maybe that's the real medicine of movement. Yes, movement can make our hearts stronger, our muscles stronger, our bones stronger, our bodies more capable. But it can also reveal something deeper. You are stronger than you think. Not because you can push through everything. Not because you never struggle. Not because you always finish. You're stronger than you think because you can adapt. You can learn. You can rest. You can begin again. You can listen to yourself. You can change direction. You can have a difficult day without deciding you have a difficult life. And you can take another step even when you're not completely sure where the road is leading. Maybe that's what strength really is. Not knowing that you'll never fail or never fall, but knowing that you've learned how to meet yourself when you do. So wherever you are today, whether you're running miles, walking around the block, stretching on the floor, rebuilding after an injury, or simply trying to find your way back to movement, don't underestimate what those small moments are teaching you. You aren't only training your body, you're learning who you are. And you might just discover you're stronger than you ever gave yourself credit for. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. If this episode spoke to you, please subscribe or follow the podcast and share it with someone who might need the reminder that strength doesn't always look the way we think it does. Keep listening to your body. Keep moving in the way that's right for you. And remember, sometimes the most important distance we travel isn't measured in miles. It's measured in how much closer we become to ourselves. Until next time, I'm Mary Beth Rim.